Hello and welcome to this presentation with AegirBio. With us today we have CEO Bradley Messmer. After Bradley's presentation there will be a Q&A session, so please stick around for that one. And with that said, I hand over the word to you, Bradley. Please take us through your presentation.
Thank you very much. And it's really a pleasure to have this opportunity to tell you about AegirBio. Here you see the agenda for the presentation. We're currently in a subscription process now for a new rights issue, and many of those details are available in the prospectus. So I'm going to try to keep this presentation focused on the big picture and the broad themes of who we are and what we hope to achieve. I'll walk through our technology platforms and business models, including some exciting new initiatives, and also describe the details and rationale for our current financing round. As I go through the presentation, a few abbreviations will be used for convenience, most notably POC for point of care, which typically means at a patient setting, as well as PON or point of need, which typically means at-home testing. And as a reminder to those maybe somewhat familiar with our company, our core technologies are what we call Verito platform, which is a unique system of reagents to measure biologic drugs, and the MagniReader platform, which is a magnetic lateral flow test platform. And I think we're all now more familiar with lateral flow than ever before. So I'd like to start by stating our mission and values. AegirBio's mission is to create products that empower people to understand and improve their unique health status. Now, we often use words like personalized or precision medicine, but at the heart of what we do is this recognition that every individual has a unique biology, whether that's their immune status or drug metabolism or response to an illness, and that understanding and properly treating individuals requires convenient, usable tools to track that variability, with an emphasis on usable. Now, our core values are rooted in our science. We come from a science background. I'm personally a scientist by training. And we have a deep recognition that we always have to get the science right. In addition, informed stakeholders are essential. We'll maintain clear communication with all stakeholders, both external, including patients, customers, and doctors, as well as internal stakeholders, such as our shareholders, our employees, and our business partners. And we will continuously emphasize that we must act with integrity and professionalism, as well as with our external partners, and demand that we only work with partners that live up to our high standards. So for those of you that have followed our company, you know that we've had a tumultuous year, and we've had some unfortunate situations that arose because partners did not deliver what we expected. So I'm confident that we fix those problems and that we are all recommitted to these values, and they'll keep us on the right path going forward. Now, AegirBio is an international company with sites in the US, United Kingdom, and Finland, in addition to our home base in Lund. I'm actually currently in San Diego, but I spend much of my time in Europe with each of the teams. And it was a unique challenge to knit together this group during the pandemic, but I'm very proud of what we've done and the integration of all of these sites into our core mission. So let me tell you a little bit about this team. I lead the senior management along with Patrick Elfwing, who's our COO, and we've recently hired an interim CFO, Patrick Gotthard, to fill in while we search for a permanent CFO. Our research in San Diego is led by Leslie Page. Our development in the United Kingdom is led by Vasi Fragko. Our technology development in Finland is led by Mika Leitinen, and our corporate strategy and US ops are led by Ella Hoysen. Now, I want to say that this team has been together pretty much through the whole ups and downs of the last year and a half. And I think it really speaks volumes to the compelling nature of our mission, that they're all still here and they're all equally excited today as they were when they joined. So I'm very proud of this team, and I think they'll do great things going forward. Of course, that team is supported by our board of directors. It includes myself, as a founder of the company. My co-founder and chairman of the board is Anders Ingvarsson. He's an experienced executive in the space. Frederick has been with one of the founding companies, Life Assays, for a long time, and so he deeply understands the business. And Seppo McKinnon is an experienced leader and venture capitalist in life sciences and specifically in diagnostics, both in Europe and abroad. So let me give you a little bit of the history in case you're not very familiar with us, and highlight some of our achievements in the last couple of years. So AegirBio was formed as a joint venture between Life Assays, which was also based in Lund, and the company I founded, AegirBio Biosciences, which is based in San Diego. 2 years ago, we listed on the NASDAQ First North Growth Market, and soon thereafter acquired two smaller companies, Viraspect and Thyrolytics. Viraspect brought expertise in lateral flow and specifically COVID antigen test, which were very timely. And Thyrolytics brought a point-of-care electrochemical detection platform that was very complementary to our magnetic lateral flow system. Thyrolytics has since been renamed AegirBio Sweden AB. Then in 2021, we merged or acquired the two parent companies so that we could become fully integrated and fully align our teams with our mission. We also launched one of the first saliva-based COVID antigen rapid tests, initially for use in the professional market, meaning with trained personnel. This is where we unfortunately chose some distribution partners that were not so good, and we've had to deal with the consequences of that. And of course, one consequence was that our sales efforts didn't come to the realization that we had hoped. But we've now recently received approval for home use of those tests, which should expand the potential sales opportunities. Now, obviously, COVID is a very dynamic and fluid market, going through a down phase, but we certainly are well positioned should the testing demand increase. And there are ongoing niches that I believe are still available to us. What's really exciting is that we've recently CE marked our first two point-of-care tests for therapeutic drug monitoring, which is the original vision of the company before COVID turned everything upside down. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. So let me give you just a quick overview of the technology platforms. We were really founded on two central platforms, the Veritope biochemistry that came from AegirBio. Veritopes are mimetic peptides that bind specifically to biologic drugs and can therefore be used as a sensor to measure drug levels in patients receiving these powerful and expensive drugs. Now they need a detection platform, and that's where MagnaSense comes into play. MagnaSense is, as I said before, is a magnetic lateral flow system. And magnetics offer several advantages over the traditional optical detection. So we've all probably taken quick tests during the pandemic or seen them, and typically you have a test line that turns red, and that's fine for a yes, no. But if you want to do things where you're measuring levels and get true quantitation, you need something a little better. And magnetics offers several advantages over reading from the surface with an optical reader. So we really think this is a best-in-class technology for rapid lateral flow tests. As I mentioned, we also acquired an electrochemical platform with Thyrolytics. Electrochemistry can do things in some cases that lateral flow and traditional immunoassays can't. And so this is a very nice piece of technology that rounds out the toolbox as we look at different product opportunities. Now, as I mentioned, we launched one of the first saliva-based COVID antigen tests. And during our development of the Viraspect product, we actually began in the research lab a deeper inquiry into what we could really do with saliva. We thought about home testing, and the need for simple sample collection and processing was certainly very front of mind. As anyone who has struggled with a home test can imagine, opening a box and having a huge sheet of instructions that tells you to take a swab and stick it up your nose is really not the ideal, although of course we all managed during the pandemic. But we instead, once we realized that saliva was a potential test material, we asked ourselves, well, with our technologies, could we make this testing as simple as brushing your teeth? And I'm happy to say that we think the answer to that is yes. And that's led to the product concept that you see here. These are engineering renderings of the concept. They may change a little bit in development, but the basic idea is that the sample collection is essentially a toothbrush, which is then inserted into a cartridge that contains the magnetic lateral flow technology for reading whatever that test is. And our initial work has been with antibodies against COVID resulting from either vaccination or infection. And we have preliminary data showing that this can work for therapeutic drug monitoring as we do with blood. And in fact, I'll show you some of this data, which is really, I think, quite striking. So this is a comparison of anti-COVID antibodies measured in saliva versus in serum. And as you can see, they are highly correlated. This is about as good as you can get. And this is enabled by a method we developed to calibrate the saliva. So essentially the question is, how much blood is in the saliva? It turns out there's a lot, but there's a variable amount for different people, or even the same person sampled at different times. And so we have a method now to calibrate and account for that, which then provides very good correlation between saliva and serum or blood. As I said, this was done with COVID antibodies. We actually think that's an interesting market opportunity. And we've done some very preliminary work for therapeutic drug monitoring that looks like we can also measure those drugs in saliva, which would obviate the need for a blood draw. And in fact, we're going to do a larger proof of concept study for that in the fall. It's being finalized right now. So in the short term, we're still focused on the different market segments that our current products can address. But what I think is really exciting is that this saliva sampling opens up the possibility that these could all converge around this simple saliva platform. And non-invasive sampling, it's not just a convenience, but it enables routine monitoring and repeated testing and opens up then new potential markets in wellness, in e-health. So I look forward to keeping everyone updated as we develop this platform. And we're all very excited about the potential here. So I don't have time to go through all of our products and their business cases, and much of that can be found in the prospectus, but I'd like to quickly walk through the case for therapeutic drug monitoring, because it's really at the heart of where we come from and where we're going. So we started years ago working with TDM for Tysabri, which is a powerful drug for controlling multiple sclerosis, but it's one that comes with a risk of a deadly brain infection called PML. And our collaborator, Dr. John Foley, is a pioneer in recognizing that the risk of PML is related to the dosing, which is standard for all patients, meaning all patients get the same dose regardless of even their body size, let alone their drug metabolism. And he had recognized that excessive dosing for some patients may be linked to PML. This has been borne out now in much larger studies. And so it's important. It really matters, not just for easing the burden on the patients, but potentially, preventing a deadly infection. And this problem transcends just Tysabri. It's actually a problem for almost all biologic drugs, because when you look at this class of drugs, what's really striking is that there's an enormous variability patient to patient in how people's bodies clear these drugs. And when you look at drug levels, they vary by about 100-fold from top to bottom, which is pretty incredible. And that variability is very consistent across the different drugs. And so that has the upshot that for many cases, the dosing is not optimal, meaning some patients are getting too much, which can have, of course, side effects, but also cost. And there are some patients that may be underdosed that would benefit or not receive benefit unless they are given more than the standard dose. And so obviously, that's a problem, both because of the side effects, but because these drugs are incredibly expensive. So obviously you want to get the most bang for your buck, and because of the cost of these drugs, the health economics are actually very significant and are now creating a very large burden on health systems, particularly nationalized health systems in Europe, but also in the US. One thing we've come to recognize, though, is that therapeutic drug monitoring, while its clinical and health economic rationale is obvious, to make it actually work, it has to fit within the clinical workflow. And we initially have tried a central lab approach in the US, and it works, but it's not ideal. It adds steps for the nurses and the patients. And so we really think the point of care, as we've always thought, is the essential manifestation that will get this in use. And so as I said before, we now actually have our first two point of care tests CE marked for Tysabri and for Remicade, which is used in a lot of autoimmune conditions. So they're now ready for clinical introduction and validation as the first step to marketing. So we're taking a measured approach to the market entry with an initial emphasis on validation studies done in collaboration with key opinion leaders. That's essential to build the credibility and provide the real world evidence for the value of these tests. But with that said, we have a more extensive pipeline ready to go once we're successful with these first products. So we want to be focused on making the first few launches successful, but we have a lot that can come afterwards. So collectively, these represent a very significant market opportunity. So to support all of these activities, we are raising money through a rights issue with preferences to existing shareholders. The subscription period is open now, and the terms are shown here and are, of course, described in more detail in the prospectus, which is also accessible through our website. This issue is 80% guaranteed, so we're confident that we'll have the resources needed to execute on these various business opportunities. So broadly speaking, we're going to use the funds to continue to invest in R&D, but we're also going to commit resources to the ongoing COVID sales, as well as new lab and TDM products. We're also going to increase our business and corporate development efforts and seek partners for those opportunities that don't fall on our critical path. In particular, we think some of the thyroid projects are ideal if we can find the right partner to help us take those to market. And in addition, we're going to remain on the lookout for other partnering or M&A opportunities that, again, will reinforce our central path here. So to summarize, I think AegirBio is back on track to become a world leader in empowering people to take control of their health. We have a great set of tools. We have a great set of talent. Our team has been through, a rough go of it, as we all have through the pandemic, and also with the ups and downs of our company. But they're still here, and they've come out, I would say, stronger and more committed than ever to fulfilling our mission and the potential that I think we all saw when we started AegirBio. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Bradley, for the presentation. So let's put you up on the screen as well. So let's start with the first question then. If we look at the organization, how have you built your new organization to be able to cover your key markets going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the biggest challenges we faced almost from the get-go with AegirBio was the pandemic got in the way. In fact, I was supposed to be presenting in Europe almost exactly 2 years ago when all the flights got canceled because the travel bans came into place. So we've had to build and integrate this team, over Zoom and Teams as we've all come to do, but it has been tricky. And now that travel has been reopened, for the last year or so, I think we've made great strides in team integration, alignment around the vision. And I think as the craziness of COVID has receded, roughly 9 months ago, we at the board level and the management level said, we really got to get back to what we want to be and what we're supposed to be. And once we did that, all the different team members, I think, really rallied around that vision, and it gave everyone a strong sense of purpose. And we've been able to now delegate and project organize across the different sites with a fluidity that comes from the trust and the camaraderie that's been built up by overcoming our challenges.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, regarding technology, people are now used to saliva testing during COVID. It's been a lot of testing for a lot of people. Is that something you will develop your products around going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's sort of interesting and kind of ironic is that when we started the company pre-pandemic, there's always been this discussion of decentralized testing and remote testing and e-health and various manifestations of that have really tried, but I don't think had gotten the sort of worldwide traction until COVID really necessitated that. So almost, well, not overnight, but over the last 2 years, we went from sort of having to be evangelists for this concept to now it being completely accepted. And I think the expectations for the public going forward is that more and more testing should be done at home. No one wants to go to the doctor if they don't have to. Nobody wants to go to the lab to have blood drawn if they don't have to. And so, people have become familiar with things like lateral flow tests and at-home sample collection. Now, with that said, as I mentioned in the presentation, I still think there's, we all rushed into this, or at least the companies that were doing antigen testing like ourselves. I mean, we rushed in because there was such an immediate need. But looking at the various products out there, you can see that the usability and the user experience has definitely been lagging. I still laugh. My wife is also a scientist and a PhD. And the first time my son brought home a COVID test from school, you had two PhDs staring at this, tablecloth size set of instructions, trying to figure it out with droppers and bottles and swabs. And it really drove home to me that the market and the public are ready for at-home testing, but the tests aren't really ready for at-home testing yet. In a truly user-friendly way. And so that's where I think we've really gotten excited around both saliva as a non-invasive sample, but there's so much room for improvement in how the user experience can be. And it just turns out that our technologies, I think, were the right answer waiting to be found.
Okay, and could you please elaborate a bit on how this is related to if we look at the other tests and other verticals in the organization?
Yeah, so we've introduced this concept of cure test, which was going to be at-home testing, and I think when we initially conceptualized it, we were looking at existing test menus, many of which are blood-based, and we had always struggled, I think, a bit with that because, of course, at-home blood sampling, it's doable, but it's not as user-friendly and appealing to a consumer. So with this recognition that saliva can be a truly robust testing matrix, it sort of solves the problem of how do you actually get people to test themselves. And so, like with the drug monitoring, obviously we're going to start with blood. We've got the tests ready to go that are based on blood. Patients are having needles stuck in them to be delivered these drugs anyway, so the barrier there is not as high. But even then, the physicians that we've talked to about the potential for saliva sampling, they all say that would be game changing. And again, it means the testing can be done remotely. It doesn't have to be done while the patient's in a busy infusion clinic. So I think across all the verticals, this transition could be game changing. And as I mentioned before, it also means you can do more testing. I come from an oncology background where a lot of cancer monitoring, the technologies to measure things are there. The problem is if it's invasive, you just can't do it that often, and you need to catch things as soon as they start to change. Enabling simple at-home non-invasive testing means you can start to really kind of do this wellness monitoring that can catch a variety of health conditions before they become serious problems.
Okay, thank you. And if we look at the commercial side, where do you see the most interesting opportunities if you look into the future?
Yeah, so I think that convergence is the big win, if you will. And I think in the short term, the markets we're pursuing, we know well. We know there are short-term opportunities that then synergize with the long-term vision. So I think the central challenge for us is going to be the balance between driving adoption and maximizing return on investment and profit from any one test. So as we think about our portfolio, the discussions we always have are both the merits of that project or product as a standalone commercial entity, but then also looking across our portfolio and the broader market penetration that we seek to achieve. So I think that that's the balance that we're very aware needs to be struck. But it also means we have different levers that we can play with for different products. And I think it's a slightly more complicated strategy than simply selling this test at this price. But I think the potential returns are so much greater that it's worth the effort.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned there the rights issue in the end of the presentation. Could you just share a bit more details on how will you allocate or use the money in the organization going further?
Yeah, so I briefly went through the use of funds, but I think in broad strokes, there's really four things we need to do. R&D, clearly one, sales and marketing, clearly the other, but investing in the company itself, the corporate development, and strengthening our business development team, and really sort of institutionalizing business development and partnering activities was something that I think was put on hold a little bit, particularly during the pandemic when we couldn't travel and it was very hard to do traditional business development activities. But now that the world's reopened, that's an area that I think we need to invest more heavily in, and I'm quite excited to do so.
Okay, great, thank you. That was the final question for this Q&A session. So a big thank you, Bradley, for the presentation and for answering all our questions. And I wish you a very good day.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.